Okay, welcome everyone to Scientia Science Writing Internship Cohort 5. And today's our distinguished speaker is Dr. Jörg Matthias Determann. Dr. Determann has been associated and we have been collaborating on behalf of Scientia for quite a while. And he is a professor of liberal arts and history at Virginia Commonwealth University, Qatar, and he is a besides that he is a prolific writer. He has been writing a lot about inclusion and equity in astronomy, and he has numerous books published about this via Cambridge University, and he has been also writing and working on about science fiction and how, especially how the Islamic world sees science fiction. So, besides being a professor, he's a prophetic writer, and I've read his work. It is very impactful in the modern terms, and how people from different backgrounds in astronomy have been marginalized. And so today we would like to welcome him again. Thank you, Dr. Determann, for joining. And today he would be talking about how it's important to have activism within astronomy as a writer. And over to you, Dr. Determann. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Foz. Big thanks to all of you for coming. It's a great honor to be back here to speak as part of the science writing internship. Yeah, I'm very excited about the kind of science writers that you are already and the science writers that you are becoming. And I would like to convince you, if you're not already convinced, that astronomy is a fascinating area to write about. It is certainly an area that a lot of people are interested in. Despite astronomy dealing with the stars, it also has a story that can be connected to humans, to people. And I think science writing is often at its best when you get that connection right between the human story as well as the story of nature and the story of the universe. And this is especially important in a subject like astronomy, right, that can deal with distances and time spans that are so huge, right, and almost beyond the imagination. So if we can connect astronomy to society through writing, I think we can garner a lot of interest from our audience. My own interest in astronomy has been nurtured in part by science fiction. I'm not sure to what extent you are all science fiction fans, or to what extent you're fans of what kinds of science fiction or SF. For me, I've long been a fan of Star Trek. Star Trek, that's one of the longest science fiction franchises, together with Star Wars, but also together with Doctor Who. There are various iterations, but these are the shows that I grew up with: Star Trek, the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. One of the slogans of Star Trek is infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So what you can see here in the cast, you can see space explorers on board spaceships and space stations coming together from different backgrounds. So we can see men and women, we can see aliens and humans, we can see androids, we can see disabled people, people of different races, nationalities, all exploring the universe together, and doing so largely peacefully. So this is a utopian vision of what the future could look like. And this is, I think, also the kind of utopian vision that a lot of activists have striven for. However, there's a certain a certain tension between inclusivity and exclusivity in science fiction and also in astronomy, right? So in principle, right, the universe is accessible to anybody, right? The sky is open, right? We can all look at the sky, or we can all sort of wonder about the sky and tell stories about the sky. And indeed, there are names for the sun, the moon, the different planets in possibly all human languages that have ever been spoken. At the same time, astronomy, just like physics and astrophysics more broadly, have also been used for military purposes. Think about spy satellites, right? Think about intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? Think about, like super weapons in space, sort of that have been imagined at various points, including, like, let's say, the Death Star in Star Wars, for instance. This is something about which a lot of literature has been written about. So astronomy that exists across cultures, but also astronomy as an accessory to war. And this tension, you have it in science fiction as well as in actual science. And there are a lot of connections between the two. So for those of you who are not fans of Star Trek, you have the idea of a kind of United Nations in space, a United Federation of Planets that mimics in its symbolism, in its logo, the United Nations. So the idea is that all people are united in exploring space. However, there's also a quasi-military arm of that United Federation of Planet, and that's called Starfleet Command. And as you can see here, the logo of Starfleet Command is actually quite similar to the logo of the United States Space Force, right? Which is part of the Department of the Air Force. So here you can see as well how spaceships, just like rockets, can be used for military purposes as well as for the civilian exploration of the universe. I'm giving you these examples of science fiction also because if you're writing about astronomy, right, a lot of people would be familiar with references to science fiction. So if you have, let's say, writing a news story about a very strange planetary system somewhere many, many light years away, maybe if you could link that real planetary system to a fictional planetary system that exists in Star Trek, Star Wars, and so on, then the audience might be able to make these connections more easily and be able to enjoy the story that you're writing more. Now, I mentioned that Star Trek has been very inclusive in terms of men and women, and astronomy has been as well. So here are these examples from Star Trek, where you have a female space explorer. You also have various kinds of aliens, including aliens without gender, sort of a huge diversity in terms of gender identities, gender expressions. And in astronomy, of course, because since the beginning of time, humans have told stories about the universe, of course there have been women and just people of all kinds of gender identities being part of knowledge creation about the universe. And of course, we can find also people of all races and ethnicities engaged in them. There are lots of books if you're interested in, for instance, finding out more about Black people, people of color in astronomy. And we find those people also depicted as space explorers in shows like Star Trek. Here's an example. Mikhail Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek. Even disability is not a disqualification for space exploration, whether in reality or in fiction. There is the example of a blind engineer on board the USS Enterprise, Geordie LaForge, but there's also the real example of Stephen Hawking, one of the most celebrated astrophysicists and scientists of all time. Stephen Hawking, perhaps being the maybe the most prominent modern and contemporary scientist who did not win a Nobel Prize. Him, despite spending much of his life and career in a wheelchair. And in the history of astronomy, we've got disabled people of various kinds. We've had deaf astronomers, blind astronomers, trying to make their way to the stars. Also, I mean, I mentioned people of all ethnicities, but also people of all nations. So astronomy has really been one at the forefront of internationalism. So trying to cross national borders, trying to overcome national boundaries. We have the International Astronomical Union that's over 100 years old, that has held meetings on all continents, including most recently in Africa as well. I was telling you how sort of in principle open astronomy has been to people of all identities, and how open it can be. However, when you go into the details, when you go into the nitty-gritty of actual science, actual stories of scientists, of course, it's not that easy. And of course, people have faced barriers based on their gender identity, or their nationality, or their ethnicity, or their ability and disability. And hence, you've had perhaps always, certainly always in modern times, also a history of activism that is part of the history of science. So there have always been scientists who not just try to sort of understand the universe, but also make the universe and make astronomy accessible to people of truly every background. And I think these are interesting stories that you can write about, right? Yes, you can write as a science writer, you can write about the discoveries. Let's say a Nobel Prize winning discovery, right? What is new in the world of scientific knowledge. However, you can also focus on the new people that we have in astronomy, and the people that have been most recently included in science, and the people who are still struggling to be included, as well as perhaps the people who are still excluded or still not quite making it. So I would encourage you to tell the story of scientists who are also activists, who have been trying to open up that field. Where do you find these activists? Well, you can find them at conferences. Fortunately, nowadays, a lot of conferences have a hybrid element or are online. So, for instance, last conference of the International Astronomical Union, you could zoom in essentially. You don't have to travel to South Africa. Or you could sort of look at the program and sort of find out about who is speaking. And there have been specialized conferences in astronomy as well as in other fields that focus on people of specific identities. So, for instance, there have been conferences on women on astronomy, or inclusive astronomy, or astronomy for equity, diversity, and inclusion in different countries. These conferences have not just been conferences that brought scientists together for like discussion of scientific topics, but also of discussion of social topics. And sometimes these conferences resulted in declarations or manifestos. So, for instance, the Women in Astronomy conference from 1992 talked about the challenges as well as the progress of women in astronomy in different fields. So, for instance, the experiences of Russian radio astronomy women, or the social situation of women in astronomy in former East Germany. And the concerns of these various women astronomers around the world were then combined in a document that was called the Baltimore Charter for Women in Astronomy that was circulated in the 1990s. Here it started with a Chinese saying, "Women hold up half the sky," where it says here in the preamble, "We hold as fundamental that women and men are equally capable of doing excellent science. Diversity contributes to rather than conflicts with excellence in science. However, current recruitment, training, evaluation, and award systems often prevent the equal participation of women. Formal and informal mechanisms that are effectively discriminatory are unlikely to change by themselves. Both thought and action are necessary to ensure equal participation for all." And this Baltimore Charter, named after the place in the US where the conference was held, also made recommendations about the kind of actions that could be taken. So, for instance, here it says, under recommendation, significant advances for women have been made by affirmative action. Affirmative action involves this establishment of serious goals, not rigid quotas for achieving diversity in all aspects of the profession, including hiring, invited talks, committees, and awards. It also, as another point says, strong action must be taken to end sexual harassment, or gender-neutral language and illustrations are important for the formation of expectations. Or here the last point is physical safety is of concern to all astronomers. And this is perhaps a particular concern in astronomy where historically people were working at night, right, and sometimes remote locations. So ensuring physical safety is absolutely important to make sure women can indeed have the same chances of careers in science. So we have conferences, we have these manifestos, and at various points you also have other sort of flashpoints. And these flashpoints are especially interesting for science writing. So if there is a particular issue that becomes hot at the moment in science and society, I think this is something that you can focus on writing articles or stories about. These are historical examples here, but examples that are still recognizing. So, for instance, China was long excluded from the International Astronomical Union, even though China obviously is a huge country that had a very, very long, distinguished tradition in astronomy. So trying to get China being included in the International Astronomical Union was only the result of a struggle and a fight by activists. Astronomical observatories are often controversial, also because they are often being built on land that is sacred by indigenous people, right? So you find often observatories on top of mountains where you have excellent views of the sky, right? Where you feel the heavens are so close that you can almost touch the heavens. Obviously, if you have a place where you can almost touch the heavens, it is likely that this is also a place that is appreciated by local communities and by indigenous communities. So there have been like protests, for instance, about the construction of observatories in Hawaii on Mauna Kea, the most important mountain for astronomy there, as well as for native Hawaiian religion. In the 2010s and 2020s, that is in the lifetimes of all of us, of course, there have also been calls for scientists to participate in various other sort of social struggles to end, for instance, sexual harassment, or struggle to end racial discrimination or anti-Black racism, for instance. Here's Strike for Black Lives that happened in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, if you might remember. Now, if you are interested in writing about these social issues in astronomy, these political issues in astronomy, you can look at contemporary examples, right? So you can just find, let's say, the loudest activists on X or in Blue Sky or Instagram or TikTok, and sort of see who is promoting inclusion in astronomy, who is trying to decolonize science, who is trying to fight for access in astronomy right now. So you can all go on social media and find the various hashtags, for instance, related to social justice and inclusion. However, you can also look at historical examples. So you can tell the stories and remind people of the stories that have existed. And here I want to give the example of Harlow Shapley. He was at Harvard. He was at an elite institution, but he was, even though he was at an elite institution, he was often not elitist and inclusive more than exclusive. He brought more women into astronomy than many, many other astronomers and scientists more broadly at the time. And he also engaged in various forms of activism. He was a big champion of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Social, and Cultural Organization. He argued that the scientists should step outside of the laboratory, that he should step outside of the observatory and fight for what is right. He also believed that the world of the stars is one world, right? That the world is not divided into east and west or into north and south, but that the world could be united in astronomy and through astronomy. And as you can imagine, he also got in trouble with some of his views. This is a New York Times article from 1946. An American committee man charges contempt, scientist alleges Gestapo hearings. So maybe that's a little bit difficult to understand, but I would like to unpack this a little bit. So this is the early Cold War, late 1940s, where you had anti-communism on the rise. And so you had a House Un-American Activities Committee. So that was a committee of the United States Congress that persecuted scientists, artists, people of various professions that it deemed to be communist or sort of sympathetic to communist. And so Shapley, the astronomer, was called in front of Congress in order to justify his action. And he alleged like a Gestapo type hearing. So he alleged that essentially these politicians, they interrogated him in the same way as Nazis in the Third Reich in Germany did just during the war. However, despite this intimidation by politicians, right, Harlow Shapley, he campaigned that the world should be an open world for astronomy. And he had notes that he wrote during World War II that sort of sought to transcend national conflict. So he writes here, some German scholars claim that Copernicus was a German, Copernicus being a great early modern astronomer. Harlow Shapley continues, and Polish scholars insist that Copernicus was a Pole. But I suggest that both misrepresent the true situation. Copernicus was a terrestrial. And Harlow Shapley, he continues, there are other scientists whose work and influence have flown beyond all national boundaries and are rightfully classed as terrestrials. We cannot use this higher classification so well for soldiers, statesmen, poets, or even composers, because they, almost without exceptions, have contributed to nationalism, even though their influence, for better or worse, have been important when translated beyond linguistic or geographical barriers. So Harlow Shapley, he makes the argument here that a lot of great people have contributed to sort of nationalism, but important astronomers have contributed to something that's bigger, that's sort of an earthly identity, a terrestrial identity, an identity that encompasses all of us. Harlow Shapley, he was also president of a commission for the creation of international observatories for the International Astronomical Union. This commission itself was soon dissolved. However, the idea that there should be observatories that belong to more than one countries continued and thrives until this day. Examples are, for instance, the Square Kilometer Array. That's the picture here on top. That's an observatory that transcends not just countries, but also continent. Or the James Webb Space Telescope that's pictured below here. That is actually a collaboration between different countries in Europe, Canada, Japan, the United States. So international astronomical observatories are not just a dream, but also a reality. Harlow Shapley and other astronomers have also championed an exchange of astronomers so that astronomers should be able to not just work in their own country, but move from country to country. So there was a commission set up by the International Astronomical Union to facilitate the exchange of astronomers with money from UNESCO. So UNESCO paid for astronomers to travel to different places in order to collaborate with foreign colleagues on research projects. And very soon, right, you have had astronomers going from different countries. So astronomer going from Mexico to India, or from Venezuela to the USA, or from Russia to France, or from Spain to Germany, or from Canada to India, and so on. Now, if this sort of sounds uncontroversial, right, the sort of UNESCO money being used for scientists to travel, if that if that sort of sounds natural, or sort of just something that everybody should agree with, well, then we also have to remind us that UNESCO is controversial until this date. So this is a news story just from last year. UNESCO so Trump withdraws from US from woke UNESCO program again. So Donald Trump criticizing UNESCO for having leftist programs, and then withdrawing America from the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization. And if you want to research that topic, there's actually a whole range of scientific organizations internationally that Trump has withdrawn the US from. So you can see this is these UNESCO programs are politically contested. Paolo Shapley, of course, is and was a professional astronomer, so somebody who had a university position, who was paid to do astronomy. However, astronomy also has a huge amateur community worldwide. So there are enthusiasts for the sky, probably in every country. And these amateurs, they've also tried to connect with one another. And here I want to give you the example of Mike Simmons. He is pictured. He is an American astronomer who has tried over decades, for instance, to bring countries together that have been separated by political conflict, such as the United States and Iran. So here he is shown as visiting a telescope workshop in Tehran, in the Iranian capital. Mike Simmons, he wrote an article on building bridges through the sky, where he argues that we have that we humans are one people, we have one sky, and there are astronomers without borders, just like there are doctors without borders, this very famous association. And Mike Simmons, this American author, he also collaborated with an Iranian astronomer called Babak Tafreshi in writing about Earth and sky being united. And the two of them championed a project called the World at Night photography project that would show that, yes, our countries might be separated, but we all are under the same stars. So here in this article, it says, we all live under the same eternally peaceful sky. Dazzling Venus hovers in the Texas twilight just hours after it's seen by sky gazers in Iran. The familiar stars of Ursa Major transit the Vatican's domes just as they do the spires of a Buddhist temple in China. The magnificent Milky Way arches above Arizona's Grand Canyon, on the same night it's seen by Nepal's inhabitants grazing the sky over the Himalayan mountains. These are views that connect all of us and can help create understanding and friendship, right? So we have the same stars that we're looking at, and these stars can connect us across all our differences. And astronomers have then also been promoters of planetary identity as something that could be in addition to, or maybe even replacing, a national identity, right? Where we see ourselves as belonging to this planet, not just a particular country. That we should take care of this planet as a whole, right? And that we should care about planetary issues such as climate change, right? So we shouldn't just think about, let's say a natural disaster that happens in our country or the neighboring country, but that we should think about global warming globally as affecting the entire human community. Essentially, we should think about our planet as being our address, right? So we have one home, and that home is Earth, and it's the same home for all of us, and we should try to live peacefully in this home together and take care of it. To conclude, astronomy, right? It deals with stars that are light years often away, Milky Ways and galaxies that are at such great distances that we might never be able to travel to them, except in science fiction, of course. So when we, for instance, write stories as science writers about the universe, we have to try and make this relevant to our readers, right? To our readers who live on this planet, to humans. And one way to make science relevant is to connect astronomy to the human story, to society, to social stories, and to connect it to those struggles over participation, over access, over representation. So this is something that I've been trying to do in my own work, but I also feel there's much more that still needs to be done, right? There are many more scientists who have not yet won Nobel Prizes, but they have done amazing things trying to tear down barriers for women, for people of color, for disabled people. And these stories haven't been told sufficiently yet, and should be told. So it would be wonderful for me to see if some of you, for instance, in your own science writing, would try to interview astronomer activists and write about their work outside of the laboratory, outside of the observatory. Thank you again. Thank you, Fawz Siddiqui, for having me. Thank you, Sadiqa Khan, also, and to my colleagues and friends, Byron Yelland and Katya Reshetova. Thank you so much.
Well, absolutely. Like always, it is very fascinating to hear from you, and especially how you bring about your own style of storytelling, how about inclusivity, and especially from the very initial historical context of Star Trek and what is being happening about in the politics and in the social geographical aspects, and how astronomers and people scientists exclusively are trying to make a difference and trying to include and all. And especially the last slide, it was like splendid as always. Like I mean, what you advocate, that you practice as well. I'm always eager and keen and very much uh, interested to learn from you, and just this was quite motivational for us as well as writers. I mean, how to be articulate and effective in our work. So especially well now we can have questions from the audience, and you can see there are very wonderful reviews of about your talk, especially like uh six of the comments are within, if you are able to see in the chat. I can there is one question as well from Ali Ahmad Khan. Would you like me to repeat, or would you like to see yourself?
Ali Ahmed Khan, I'm just looking at it. I have a question. Like great authors who have made fictional creativity to a next level. One of my favorite authors, Roald Dahl and Paul Cello, how you like them, and others who have made science fiction. How can they think or imagine about these characters and storytellings? So I think often, right, we see science and art as separate, right? So either you go, for instance, to an art school, or you're going to a science faculty, right? In high school, either you focus more on the natural science track or more on the humanities track. However, these writers, these science fiction writers in particular, they can tell us that art and science can be combined, right? That one doesn't have to choose between being an artist or a scientist. One doesn't have to choose between focusing on the human world or focusing on the natural world, but that one can bridge these different cultures. So I like the authors that you mentioned, but also like science fiction and fantasy authors more broadly, because they are they're trying to sort of bridge these different spheres. And I think for you as science writers, you can definitely learn something from science fiction authors, right? Because in the end, you also are combining art and science, right? When you do science writing and good science writing, you're not writing a scientific paper as such. You're not just writing a paper full of numbers and equations, but instead you're creating a narrative. So you also want to tell a story that is beautiful, that is compelling, that reads well. So yes, your topic is nature and your topic is science, but if you're writing, for instance, about activists, you're also writing about people and their social concerns. And if you're writing well, then you're also doing art. You're doing something that is aesthetic, like a good narrative construction is. So yeah, if you're interested in these authors, keep reading their works and maybe learn from their style.
Okay, so there are other two questions as well you can take up.
Lavish Kumar, can you suggest pathways of pipelines for astronomers in Pakistan to participate? So that's great. So the wonderful thing about astronomy is that it is so open, right? You should be able to, for instance, get a telescope, a small telescope at least, relatively easily. And everybody can be an amateur astronomer, right? And amateur astronomers until today, for instance, have made important discoveries. They've often been the first people to spot certain asteroids, for example, right? The sky is so huge and professional astronomers can't cover it all. So even as a young person, you can sort of get your own telescope. But even if you live in a city with a lot of light pollution, you can also find a lot of data, a lot of images about astronomy accessible. So in general, for instance, most of what NASA produces is in the public domain. So NASA images you can use, or a lot of data coming from the Hubble Space Telescope is made publicly available. And this data, right, you can analyze with AI, with your own programs, with algorithms. You would need to know how to do that, but in principle, the data is there, right? It's not confidential data. There's no data privacy concerns. Any data that's collected by the Space Telescope, by Hubble, by James Webb Space Telescope, you can just use for your own purposes. Now, what I would encourage you to do so is, because astronomy nowadays uses a lot of computing, if you want to become an astronomer, would be good to learn programming, to learn programming languages such as Python, for instance. It would be useful to know what kind of AI programs are. If you want to become a professional astronomer, you should think about, obviously, doing a degree. It doesn't have to be a degree in astronomy per se. It can also be a related field. So, for instance, you could do a degree in physics or a degree in engineering, or if you're interested in areas like biology, astrobiology or astrochemistry, so life in the universe, chemical elements in the universe. You can also study biology or chemistry. You can do a really good degree in Pakistan itself, and then sort of take it from there, see whether in your own research area there are potential supervisors in Pakistan. If not, you can also think about doing a master's degree or a PhD in another country. So FOSR is in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is a great location. I know there are also like lots of people in Pakistan who study at Chinese universities. China is a powerhouse of science increasingly. So there are lots of opportunities. Nida Fatima wrote another question. I just wanted to ask, how can science writers talk about activism and astronomy without sounding biased or political, especially when the audience is so global? How do you talk about activism, right? So what you can do is you don't have to talk about your own politics, right? You don't have to say these are my own political thoughts, right? Instead, you can just write like a journalist about the activists and what are their political concerns, right? So for instance, if you have an environmentalist astronomer, right? Somebody who is opposed to light pollution, and pollution in general, right? Who want to reduce pollution in the atmosphere, also so that we have better access to the stars, right? You don't have to agree with that person, but you can just talk about their life, their experiences. Where are they coming from, right? Maybe they've grown up in a city where there has been so much pollution that they can't see the Milky Way, and they want to sort of find ways, for instance, to have energy efficient lighting. That yes, it's still safe at night. You still have lights in the street, but not too much light that the sky becomes so bright that you can't see any stars anymore, right? So you can just focus on that person and tell their story, right? And I think that's often what good journalism is. Good journalism is not about you, and good writing is not about you unless you're writing an autobiography. But good writing is often about telling the stories of other people different from your own, and you might even have views different from your own, right? And try to sort of empathize and try to sort of see where people are coming from. And I think if it's a good story that you're telling, if it makes sense, if it is compelling, then I think people would want to read it. Another question here by Muhammad Sofyan Hashimi. Thank you for your insight, Mr. Determann. I want to ask, how should writers from the Global South frame space science that is largely controlled by the Global North? So that's a really good point. I mentioned that we all are under the same sky, right? And that is true for a lot of objects, right? Wherever you are in the world, you can see the sun, you can see the moon, you can see the major planets. However, there are also certain stars that you can only see in the northern hemisphere, and there are certain stars that you can only see in the southern hemisphere. There are certain constellations in the northern hemisphere and certain constellations in the southern hemisphere. And I think that's also why it's so important to have countries in the global north and global south collaborating, because if you just have observatories in Europe and North America and Japan, you can't see all the stars, because certain stars you can only see from South Africa or Chile, or more generally, right, in sort of southern countries. And that's, I think, a point that a lot of astronomers make, but the point that is also worth stressing. If we want to make real progress, if we want to truly understand what's happening in the sky, then we need to involve all countries. We can't just have observatories in the global north alone. We also need the best instruments in countries of the global south too. And of course, if we want to have the best minds, right? If we want to have the brightest people in science, we can't just only have scientists from a few countries. We need to have brains from every country if we want to, let's say, solve the big problems of the world, such as climate change, right? We really need all the minds and brains that we can. I think another question here by Muntaha Uzaid. Thank you so much for the talk, Dr. Determann. As a Star Wars fanatic myself, this was so much fun. Listening reminded me of the book Hidden Figures, though not directly related to astronomy and more towards aerospace. What would you say is the line at which a story becomes more of a science fiction novel than an informational article? I think it becomes more of a science fictional story, right? If you're dealing with fictional characters, if you're dealing with fictional times, right? If you're setting a story in the far future, if you're imagining scientists, space explorers, spaceships that don't exist. I think when you talk about real people, real scientists, right? Scientists that actually exist, then it can be more documentary, right? It can be more non-fiction. You mentioned Hidden Figures. That's one particular book and also movie about African American women who contributed to the United States space program during the 1950s, 60s, 70s, who were basically hidden because all the media attention at the time focused on these white male astronauts like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and so on. And I think there are so many more hidden figures that have not gained the attention that they deserve, right? There are, for instance, so many people of South Asian background in the American space program, right? We all know that the technology sector in the US, including Silicon Valley, is full of people from Asia, South Asia, East Asia, Pakistanis, Indian, Chinese, and so on. And right, sort of sometimes the focus, the media attention is on these white male executives, people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, but there are actually a lot of people of color in the American tech industry, and I think their stories still need to be told. There's we know a lot about Elon Musk and his life and his relationships and his politics, but there are so many other people who work in aerospace, who work in companies like SpaceX, for instance, whose lives deserve to be written and analyzed and explored and told.
Well,
Did
absolutely.
I?
Y- yeah,
Thank you. Did I cover every question? Sorry,
yeah,
Froze.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it has been very enriched discussions from very diverse questions today we had. I'm so glad about it. And okay, so I have one question. I don't want to be political and social, social context, but it is actually uh, it's very difficult whenever I have these conversations with people. It always ends up in the political and social spectrum because it influences our daily lives. So from, as you mentioned about that, from the US perspective, and as you know, the NASA since the moon landing, and even today the open source data and access, it has been always a leader and a brand for the identity about space exploration. So my question is, as Donald, US has withdrawn from more than 60 organizations, and a lot of and few of them been about science, and more importantly, as but recently there has been a good development that through Congress they were able to save a lot of funding up for NASA. And for example, uh, as you know, there has been the mission about the Mars sample return, which has not been able to save. So broadly, the background I was trying to sketch. My question is, if we are going to have such decisions and such ideologies being as a symbol of function, from a function perspective, will be able to revert, and how much does it hinders the progress? How do you see it, the whole scenario? How do you see it? How it hinders our progress in science?
Yeah. I think right now America is sort of undergoing a lot of changes, right? And you mentioned how there are so many scientific organizations that NASA has withdrawn from. Sorry, that the United States have withdrawn from. Uh, so right now, I think the United States isn't the best partner often, like for long-term collaborations. So I think maybe in this moment, it might be good to look at other partners. For instance, there are a lot of collaborations uh, between other global north and global south countries, as well as between different global south countries, right? I mentioned how there's a lot of collaboration between China and Pakistan, also including in the aerospace field, right? For instance, with the joint fighter jets. And like uh, while right sort of American politics under Donald Trump is very difficult to predict. Yeah, it's very hard to see what Donald Trump might be up to next week. I think it's also important for scientists to look at other countries, right? Sort of to maybe think about, if you're in Pakistan, collaborate with South Africa, or collaborate with Brazil or Chile, or to collaborate with South Korea, and so on. And perhaps there are some more sustainable collaborations that can be started there. So yeah, even though I know my own talk was very focused on the United States, I think we're also at a moment where I think it's good to see what other expertise, what other possible collaborations there are around the world.
Yes, thank you for a very informative answer from the perspective how we can create more space and find alternative options. And you are quite right. And in that way, we are able to be more equitable and uh, inclusive as well. So that's our goal. And since is there any question you can ask? Otherwise, we are quite accurate precise on the timing. But absolutely wonderful. It was again always inspiring to hear from you, Dr. Determann, and thank you for taking out time and energy. And it's always different with you. Thank you, Dr. Determann.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was nice to meet you all. Feel free to stay in touch, be in touch, write me an email, connect with me on social media, and let me know if you ever come through Doha to Doha. I would love to see you in person, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.